I have done nothing wrong in this house.
Nothing wrong. Nothing wrong, she says. 8 years and not one son. Not one. You call that nothing?
Children are a gift from God. You do not choose.
God. You want to tell me about God in my son's house? Your God has given you 3 girls and an empty belly where a son should be. Pack your things. Sandra, just go and pack.
Victor, look at me. Look at your wife and tell me yourself.
My mother has spoken.
Then God is watching, and He does not forget.
The car ride back to her parents' house took 4 hours. Sandra sat in the back with her 3 daughters pressed against her, Adaeze on her left, Chisom on her right, and little Neka asleep across her lap, with one small fist curled under her chin. The road from Onitsha stretched long and dark ahead of them. Victor's driver kept his eyes forward. Victor was not in the car. He had not even walked her to the gate. She did not cry on that road. She had finished crying 3 days before, the night his mother first called the family meeting, the night she heard the word cursed used about her body in a room full of people who had eaten her food for 8 years. She had cried until there was nothing left. What remained was something quieter, something that sat in the center of her chest like a stone that had finally found the bottom of a river. Her father was waiting at the gate when the car pulled in. He was a small man, thin-shouldered, grey at his temples, but he stood the way he always stood, like a man who had decided long ago that dignity was not negotiable. He opened the car door himself. He looked at Sandra. He looked at her granddaughters. He did not say a word about Victor. He did not ask a single question. He simply reached in, lifted Neka from her lap without waking her, and walked toward the house. Her mother was harder. Her mother stood in the doorway with her arms folded and her mouth set in a line that Sandra recognized from childhood, the line that meant she was holding back something large. When Sandra walked past her into the house, her mother touched her arm once, briefly, and then went to the kitchen to heat food. That was how her mother loved, through action, through soup at midnight. Sandra sat at the table with her daughters around her, and she ate, and she thought, and she decided something before that plate was empty. She would not beg, she would not call, she would not send word through relatives asking Victor to reconsider. She had watched other women do that, watched them shrink and negotiate and reduce themselves to fit back into houses that had expelled them, and she had seen what it did to them over years. It hollowed them out. It made them grateful for crumbs from tables they had once set. She would not do it, not for herself, not for her daughters. What she would do, she did not yet fully know, but she would do something. The first year was the hardest, not because of hunger. Her father made sure they did not go hungry. But hunger was not the only thing that could break a woman. There was the silence of neighbors who no longer visited. There was the pity in people's eyes at church, that particular softness that was not kindness, but something closer to relief that it was not them. There were her daughter's questions that started simple and grew complicated as months passed. Adaeze at 7 understood more than Sandra wished she did. She had started coming home quieter than she left. One evening she found her sitting alone in the backyard singing softly to herself, a song Sandra did not recognize, something the child seemed to have made up entirely, and something in Sandra's chest cracked open at the sound of it. She sat beside her daughter in the dirt. She listened. She did not interrupt. When Adaeze finished, she looked at her mother and said, "Mama, does my voice sound nice?" Sandra looked at her child. At this girl with Victor's forehead and her own mother's eyes. At this child the world had sent back as though she were not enough. She said, "Your voice sounds like it was made in heaven and lent to the earth." Adaeze smiled and started again from the beginning. That was the moment Sandra knew. Not fully, not with any plan attached, but she knew. She began to pay attention differently after that. She listened to Adaeze sing at dinner, at church, in the bath, between homework and sleep. She borrowed a small speaker from her brother and played music in the evenings, old songs, new songs, songs from other countries, and she watched how her daughter moved inside music like it was a language she had been born already fluent in. She began recording her on her phone, small videos, nothing planned, just a child and her voice and her mother watching with an attention that felt like prayer. By the second year, Sandra had taken a small loan from her father and enrolled Adaeze in vocal training with a woman in Enugu who had once sung backup for musicians whose name Sandra knew from radio. The woman's name was Mrs. Okafo, and she had a studio the size of a storage room and ears that missed nothing. The first day she heard Adaeze, she stopped the session mid-scale and turned to Sandra and said, "How long has this child been training?" Sandra said, "She has not. This is the first day." Mrs. Okafon looked at Adaeze for a long moment. Then she said, "Come every Saturday, we will work." Sandra took on a second job to cover the fees. She had been sewing from home, school uniforms, church dresses, alterations, since the third month after her return. She added evening work at a provision store 2 streets away. She woke before dawn and slept after midnight. Her body ached in ways she did not tell her mother about. But on Saturday mornings, when she sat outside Mrs. Okafor's studio and heard her daughter moving through exercises on the other side of the wall, growing stronger, growing cleaner, growing into something that no longer sounded like a child playing, she felt something that she had no simpler word for than purpose. Chisom showed a gift for numbers. Sandra noticed it early and fed it. Past papers, extra lessons, a second-hand calculator she cleaned and wrapped like something precious. Nneka was still small, but already fierce, stubborn in the particular way that Sandra recognized as her own stubbornness, the kind that would one day be called determination by people who respected her and difficult by people who feared her. She raised all 3 with the same message, not spoken in one grand conversation, but woven into every ordinary day, into the way she corrected their posture at the table, into the way she made them finish what they started, into the way she never, not once, allowed anyone in her presence to speak of them as less than exactly what they were. You are not what anyone's family decided you are worth. You are what you build with what God gave you. Never forget that. By the 3rd year, Adaeze had begun performing at church events. Small things. Harvest Sundays, Women's Day programs, but she commanded a room in a way that had nothing to do with her age. People turned when she sang. Conversations stopped. There was a quality in her voice that was difficult to name, not just beauty, but weight, as though every note carried something true inside it. A video reached a music producer in Lagos in the 4th year. It was not even a proper recording. It was someone's phone footage from a wedding Sandra had allowed Adaeze to perform at, shaky and half lit and catching only half the song. But it was enough. The producer called Sandra directly. He wanted to meet. He wanted to talk about what a proper recording could look like. Sandra went to Lagos with Adaeze and said nothing to anyone about where they were going. She sat across from that producer in his office, and she did not smile too easily, and she did not agree too quickly, and she asked every question she had written in a small notebook on the bus ride down. She had done her research. She knew what a bad contract looked like. She knew what rights meant and what royalties meant, and what it meant to sign something without reading every line. The producer looked at her with something between surprise and respect. He said, "Most parents just say yes." Sandra said, "I am not most parents." They reached an agreement that protected Adaeze completely. Sandra managed every detail herself. She became not just her daughter's mother, but her daughter's first line of protection, the person who stood between Adaize's gift and every hand that reached for it without earning the right. The first single released when Adaize was 15. It moved quietly at first. Radio play in Enugu, then Abuja, then Lagos. Then it found the internet. And the internet found it. And something happened that Sandra had believed in but had not dared to say aloud. The song broke. Not gently, it broke wide open. It was on every platform. It was in comment sections and on people's stories and in the mouths of DJs who had never heard of Adaize 6 months before. Her name was everywhere. And behind her name, in every interview, in every photograph taken backstage or in studios or at award ceremonies, was Sandra. Not pushed forward, not performing, simply present. A woman in good clothes with a straight back and eyes that had seen enough to be unimpressed by rooms that were supposed to intimidate her. Nigeria saw Sandra, and Nigeria recognized something in her that needed no explanation. It was at the third major award ceremony that Victor saw her for the first time in 5 years, on television. He was sitting in the parlor of the flat he now rented, a smaller flat in a less comfortable part of Onitsha, because things had shifted in the years since. His mother's health had declined, his brothers had their own troubles, the business had gone through difficult seasons. The new woman his mother had tried to bring in lasted less than 2 years. He watched the camera find Sandra in the audience as Adaize accepted her award on a stage lit like a dream. He watched his daughter, this child he had sent away in the backseat of a car without even walking her to the gate, hold a trophy above her head while a stadium roared. He watched Sandra stand and clap with the careful, full dignity of a woman who had built every single thing she was currently standing inside. He turned the television off. Then he sat in the silence of his flat for a very long time. He called Sandra 6 weeks later. She answered on the third ring. He said, "Sandra, it is me." She said, "I know." There was a long pause. He said, "I have been thinking about everything, about what I allowed to happen, about what I did not do when I should have done it. I have been carrying it." Sandra said nothing. She let him carry it a little longer. He said, "I made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake of my life, and I know I have no right to ask anything, but I would like to see you, and the girls, if you would allow it." Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Victor, my daughters have a life they built with me, a beautiful life. When they are ready to see their father, if they are ever ready, that will be their choice, and I will support whatever they decide. But you are not calling them, you are calling me, and I want you to understand something." She paused. "I do not hate you. I stopped carrying that a long time ago because it was too heavy and I had too much to build. But I am not the woman you sent home in the back of your driver's car. I am not incomplete. What you took from me when you said nothing in that parlor, I rebuilt it, every piece, and then I built more on top of it. So if you are calling because you are hoping for something, for forgiveness that feels like an open door, I need you to sit with what I am telling you. There is no door. There's only the life I have, and it is full, and you are not in it." She said, "Goodbye, Victor." She ended the call. She sat for a moment in her office, the one with the window that faced the water, the one she had furnished herself piece by piece, and she breathed, in and out, the way she had learned to breathe in the hard years when breathing itself felt like an act of will. Then she picked up her phone and called Adaize to ask what she wanted for dinner. Her daughter laughed at something before answering, and Sandra closed her eyes and listened to that laugh. This child the world had called not enough. This daughter who filled a stadium with her voice. And she thought of a parlor in Onitsha and a man who would not meet her eyes, and a car ride through the dark, and a small girl singing in a backyard to no one but herself and God. And she smiled. And it was the kind of smile that does not need anyone to see it. Who do you think suffered more in the end? Victor, who lost his family, or his mother, who started it all? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.